Hi there, and welcome to another edition of Israel Explained. Why is Trump pushing so hard for a ceasefire edition? So, this is what we know right now. Steve Witkoff, who is the envoy Trump is sending to the Middle East for negotiations, came to Israel after having visited Doha, where the main talks over a ceasefire have been taking place. After that conversation, Netanyahu approved sending head of the Mossad, Dedi Barnea, and IDF chief negotiator and Nitzan Alon to Doha to pursue talks. Several sources had said earlier that they would not be sent to Doha unless there was either breakthrough or a very good chance of a breakthrough in talks. It's very clear that Trump is putting a lot of pressure on all the different sides in this negotiation to reach a deal before January 20th. He does not want this on his plate. The reasons for that are domestic and foreign. On a domestic level, there's a lot of opposition to the war in Gaza, both on the left, but also among increasingly large sections of the right. Indeed, it's been dividing a lot of the MAGA discourse over recent months with a pro-Israel contingent and an anti-Israel contingent. On a global level, the war in Gaza has been poisoning relations between the United States and a lot of its Arab partners. It's definitely not something that his partners in the Gulf, like the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, are particularly happy about. And then there's also something else. I believe that Trump wants to be able to overshadow Biden and show I've been able to bring peace and a deal to the Middle East where Biden has not. All those things together are leading Trump to try to put pressure on Israel and on Hamas to reach a deal. The issue is it's very difficult to pressure Hamas. We saw Trump say that all hell will break loose if Hamas doesn't agree to a deal. But sources I've talked to in Israeli intelligence say that's not a very effective threat because all hell has already broken loose on on, on Gaza. What it's a lot easier for Trump to do is to threaten Israel and also to offer quid pro quo to Israel in exchange for agreeing to the deal. And we'll talk a little bit about what that quid pro quo might be in a second. Now, it looks like both sides are making concessions at the negotiation table, but Israel is likely to make greater concessions. And that's because on the most basic issue, which is an end to the war, and Hamas has not caved at all, and continues to stand firm. On other issues like the pace of the Israeli withdrawal, the amount of prisoners that will be released for each hostage, and things of that nature, Hamas may be making some concessions, but not too many. From what we've been hearing, Hamas has yet to provide a list of the hostages that are alive, which has been a firm Israeli demand for quite a while. So we're not seeing Hamas be that forthcoming. And that's one of the reasons I think we're going to be seeing more concessions from from the Israelis. Hamas has reportedly agreed to move off some of the most contentious issues from the beginning of negotiations until later in negotiations. Either way, both Israeli sources and Hamas sources are telling the international press. I just saw in Reuters, I just saw in several Israeli outlets that a deal is very close. Both sides saying very predictably that the other side is the main obstacle and everything is up to them to agree. Meanwhile, Israel is trying to put pressure on Hamas itself by threatening to curtail aid as much as possible if a deal is not reached. That likely is something that they've coordinated with Trump. Trump would support, it appears, curtailing the aid, although not necessarily stopping the aid altogether, and that's indeed not what Israel is threatening. I've seen a couple of reports and talked to a couple of people who believe that in order to get Israel to agree, Trump is also talking through back channels to Israeli officials about two um, rewards that it will pay to Israel. One would be an attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities, something that there's been some coverage of in the media. And another is the possible facilitation of Israeli annexation of the West Bank. Both of those things, if given as a concession to Israel in exchange for agreeing to a ceasefire, would help strengthen Netanyahu domestically and strengthen Israel's position in the Middle East if it agrees to a ceasefire. But how much that would help is open to interpretation. If Israel agrees to a ceasefire now, it will not have achieved one of its main goals in the war, arguably the main goal in the war, which was to replace Hamas as the ruling party in Gaza. That would leave Netanyahu vulnerable to a lot of domestic attacks, of course, and to a possible investigation committee, which the vast majority of the Israeli population supports, and it could put his coalition under threat. Having said that, Netanyahu has been able to pad his coalition recently by adding Gideon Sa'ar and peeling off a member of Knesset from Ben Gvir, Almog Cohen, that will probably remain in the government even if he gets a hostage deal. So even if Ben Gvir leaves, Smotrich likely will not. Gideon Sa'ar will provide the cushion needed to survive, and the government will likely survive. However, it will be weaker as a result, which is why Trump has to offer other rewards in exchange for a possible deal. So a deal is looking more likely. One of the things that Netanyahu will do in order to try to survive if the deal is reached is look at the way the deal is structured, which he structured it that way for this reason, with three stages. And there's a first stage, a second stage, and a third stage, and the Israeli army doesn't fully withdraw until the end of the third stage. So that will give a lot of time for Netanyahu to try to advance different political goals while the ceasefire is ongoing, constantly threaten to end the ceasefire, kind of like what's happening in Lebanon now, perhaps find a reason or even an excuse to renew the war. In the meantime, either way, the different stages allow him to play for time. So if Netanyahu really wants to, and if there's enough pressure from Trump, he now has the room to maneuver to agree to a deal. Okay, so that's it for today. If you like what I do here, consider supporting me on Patreon at Shael Media and listening to my history podcast, the History of the Land of Israel podcast, with a new episode coming in the next few days. I will see you here next time something interesting